We're live. Back from my week-long hiatus from making some kind of smart-ass comment last year on a YouTube video. What a shame. Whatever shall we do about it? Okay, I really don't live in the projects. It just looks like I do. All right, so see if I can make this happen. I wanted to share with you something this evening that I started working on last year, and I have read part of it online, but I've gone through and I've been working on it a little bit this weekend, and I would like to share it with you because I believe that it's probably going to be the greatest book I've ever written. I'm very happy about it. Very excited about it. Some of it you'll recognize because I've talked about it before, but this week we're going to go back in further on it. Last year, I remember I was laying on the couch listening to, I believe, Interstellar. The idea come across my mind that the cost of a life of high adventure is everything you love. And see, that's a hell of a thing to say, because if I have a life of high adventure, well, why would I ever want to engage in adventure if it's going to cost me everything that I love? The proper perception of that is it's going to cost me the immature idea of what I love. It's going to cost me the emotionally undeveloped ideas of those things that I believe to be important in my life. Good evening. So I'm going to read kind of what I've written. I've got roughly 20 pages here that I've been working on, and some of it I've read before, but I've gone a little bit further into it. And I think, it's not anything that I haven't said before, but I think an elaboration upon the subject is vital at this point. Now, having said that, as I say, I did get one mark against me on YouTube, so much of this is going to, if I can figure out how to download all this nonsense, most of this is going on to Twitter and YouTube and Instagram, and we'll see what happens from there, because I have a feeling they're going through cleaning everything up before the elections. But I could be wrong. I could have just been an asshole that day and they caught me. So, good evening. So let's take a good long look at this. I'm going to read this excerpt from the new book that I'm writing. I would like to have it finished up by the end of summer, but I have an art show that I want to do next year with some of the things that I've made that I think would be fairly prominent. At any rate, what we have to understand is that everyone who comes to this path of Austro, Norse paganism, heathenry, whatever you want to call it, does so with a basic idea or hope, perhaps, that great opiate of the masses by Karl Marx, that things will get better. Trouble is, it's usually in some real undefined manner. Now, in that regard, I would submit to you that we exhibit more faith than most people, because we're not engaging in an idea or a thought process that believes that something else will do it for us. Every day, through trial and error, people of all kinds who follow this path are surviving. Things get better, old wounds find healing, and relationships grow stronger. And the opposite is true as well. Things get worse, relationships fall apart, old wounds become deep scars. And in short, the ups and downs of life continue as they always have. Yet in this spirituality, they've become our responsibility, not someone else's. Now that leads us to a life of high adventure if we are brave enough. Now, I wrote here, this is what inspired it. The whole thing that triggered the idea for this book was the cost of a life of high adventure is all that you love. And I wrote some things here that help us not be afraid in losing all that we love. There's love along the way, all kinds of love. As a lover, as a parent, as a brother or sister. See, such power never leaves us, and it forms a part of an intricate whole. Each new love is a learning experience for a different part of you to develop. That is a difficult thing to comprehend. Now, you will find that you will grow stronger, bolder, and braver as the call to move forward beckons you. Now, this love is the power that encourages. It reminds us that others have faith in us too. It It reminds us bolder and forward we take each step in life, each new adventure, small or large, grand or mundane. Every experience that is not laced with some aspect of love stymies our development. Now, I will get to the flip side of that coin here in just a minute, called pain. See, it's our beloved memories that bring a smile to our face when the sun sets, as it's doing now, beautifully, I might add. And every morning empowers the warm memories of those we have loved that have passed on. I always think of Odin drinking from golden cups with Saga at the edge of the lake in the morning. What an amazing thing. I have heard that it is an aspect of Frigga that I don't much subscribe to, but I've also heard that it is perhaps one of his daughters, which I think is a beautiful sentiment and one that it reminds me of the relationship that my grandfather had with my mother as he got very old. And it was a beautiful thing. In many ways, we may hear the songs of our ancestors in our heart, intertwined with our thoughts, or perhaps most dramatically in the sounds of nature itself. In our aloneness, hey, babe, we discover the weaknesses that preclude our growth into something more. What does that look like? Though it seems as if the direction is never clear, much as the butterfly who never flies in a straight line, and yet it arrives exactly where it needs to be, the incredible urge to move, to do, to see, touches us all in some way. At times, we must awaken it. And when we do, it is as the first fire lit by mankind. A wondrous and terrible thing that urges us to leave what we know behind. It is the call of our faith, and it is a journey through our own hearts. And see, the most prominent thing is that, and then we finally learn to love ourselves. See, no one shows, I've said it many times, no one shows up at the door of any church because everything's going fucking hunky-dory in their life. They show up here because something's wrong and they want more. They expect something more. They need something more. They feel like, I need something more to continue putting one foot in front of the other. Then the universe welcomes us home, be it across a rainbow bridge or to the halls of our ancestors. The wide wandering journey of life gives us what we need to regale those loved ones who went before us with wonderful stories of a life well lived, of children who have been loved and nurtured to become great themselves. This is the power of our faith. As with any path of spirituality or adventure, if you prefer, there are many common threads that have been woven throughout the tapestry of the world's ancient and modern faiths. One is the idea of sacrifice, and yet another is love, as we've discussed. One may also include a desire to connect with the divine in some fashion in an attempt to become something more. Abraham is not called Abraham in the Bible. He is called Abram until he finally begins to sacrifice his son, to offer up all that he loves. And after that, he is called Abraham. That H represents the breath of inspiration. Throughout the lore, breath, the breath of life, is a very important thing. Indeed, it is important in the founding of the very building of mankind from the ash and the elm. Throughout time, history, and geography, a breath of inspiration is something that we desperately need along the journey that we engage in. Now, in ancient times, a sacrifice was believed to garner all three for the participant of such a ritual. It has been the constant yearning of mankind to touch what lies beyond in some way in an effort to empower ourselves. But to what end? The very practice of sacrifices left scars upon the psyche of mankind, right? Hundreds of thousands of skulls near temples in Central America have left a mark of fear indelibly etched into our thought processes. The same can be said for forests filled with the hanging bodies of defeated enemies, offerings to Odin and Tyr. The first feeding ground of the Valkyries was the battlefield littered with the corpses of men who have sacrificed their lives for the kingdoms, their nations, their countries, but more importantly, for the men with whom they were serving. Such terrifying remembrances have created a window for our mind's eye that we have been taught to be too afraid to look through for far too long. This terror was mitigated when the Abrahamic faiths proclaimed that such a thing would no longer be necessary, as their one true God sacrificed himself for the entirety of the world. This is the key component, the key difference between all of those pagan faiths from which the Bible was cumulatively published and plagiarized. Every tale in the Bible can be traced to a much older pagan tale. The one key difference is that says the church of today says, you don't need to do that. All you got to do, he did it for you. Well, it's no wonder the world's in the shape that it's in. When men refuse the call to adventure, when women refuse the call to adventure. It makes sense at a very great level as to why these things would be reintroduced into society today. But it was a terror to mankind of the time in which it was done. One of the concepts I wrote in Beneath the Sacred Tree was the repetition throughout the recorded history of deities that had been crucified and died for 3 days to be reborn. None of them, it appears, seem to have added the proclamation of, I'm doing this so you don't have to. For those times and those followers, such ancient ways, it was an example. Those examples of what to sacrifice to become better are readily apparent in the lore of our faith. The exploration of the parts of ourselves to sacrifice along the way is a central concept to all of this. The cost of high adventure. And then when you say cost, there's that immediate knee-jerk reaction of fear. What such an effort might appear as in our lore, that's my specialty. Now we are prepared for the ideas of love and sacrifice. Is that all we should expect? Hardly. I believe we should have a healthy expectation of more. The desire to connect with the divine as we perceive it and the yearning to possibly rise above our station in life is primary among them. But so is the development of a mindset that allows us to accept with strength and hope everything that occurs along the way. I've read a lot of literature, both modern and old, looking for such things. I have found wisdom with the Greeks, a celebration of the entirety of the spiritual experience in the tombs of the Egyptian spiritualities, Slavic, Celtic, Roman, even the tales of North and South American Native Americans contain wide-ranging knowledge. It seems that each of them possesses a piece of the puzzle, some remnant required to move the individual forward completely. Here and there lay hints that much greater knowledge is there for those with the courage to look. I will be adding that all of them say basically the same thing. But in that part of the world, one idea is more prominent as a need to move that people forward. This idea is more prominent to move this people forward. The unique development of their environment, the challenges that they face in their life. Up north, you had to deal with a cave bear and a saber-toothed tiger. Down south, you had to deal with a 20-foot crocodile and a serpent that will swallow you whole, and then lions and leopards, and over here you had woolly mammoths. All of these great challenges. You had cold, you had heat, you had desert, you had wetlands. All of those things created a unique challenge for individuals to develop. We are in the same boat today spiritually. The Hindus have hinted at ancient knowledge capable of empowering us. In many ways, the depth of the experience rivals the Nordic ideas, though I do not subscribe to the idea that they are much related beyond the most common of ideas present in ancient tales. Right? One very important thing to remember, though, is that the strength of their faith enabled them to withstand the most violent form of Abrahamic faith, Muslim invasion, and continue to thrive to the present day. None of the ancient philosophies managed to pull off such a feat. From Western Asia to the Americas, this idea of he'll do it for you so you don't have to spread like poison. Polluting the well from which we drew our inspiration, modifying it, erasing it, demanding that we forget and forget we did. As we peruse the tales of Rig, Freya, Thor, and all the rest of our pantheon, there are elements of this connection we can still distill for our own use, such is the purpose of this book. To outline for those willing and brave enough to read it that there is a path here that encourages us to expect something more. Perhaps we will define it together. Or you may find a definition that suits you personally. Whatever the case, I believe it to be high time that we begin to reach for the depth of our faith our ancestors had, a faith that allowed them to build families, kingdoms, and a mindset to survive that has resulted in you. So there's no better place to begin an adventure than from the beginning. This is exactly how the poetic and the prose editors begin, with a loss and a journey. One should bear in mind that it is quite possibly such tales as these, with similar elements that are repeated across time and geography, that of a journey. To be beckoned or called forth, or to be driven by pain. Such is the case with King Gilfy. In the true style of the self-important, he makes a wager with a woman. much as many of us have for a marriage. We wager that things will be okay, that the happily ever after is ours at last. Seated on top of the world with the new bride. Though very few of us have asked this question to our partner, help me understand how we can make this better. Many will proclaim that such a thing isn't necessary. Indeed, perhaps it wasn't. There were roles that were to be defined and fulfilled, leading to marital bliss. But today, it will probably end as most marriages do. 50% of them, over half of them, in divorce. 98% of them are waiting on a Christian deity to handle the difficulties of the relationship for them. And this is a problem. I believe the proper new term for such a thing is spiritual bypassing. Always finding the silver lining because we believe that something else will do the hard work of living for us. And it's not happened that way. We're built to be great receptacles and imitators of these examples that we have, for these tales that have carried through the centuries. We are literally built to emulate the strength of these stories. Such tasks belong to us and to us alone. It is our responsibility to create an environment as men where women are able to express who they are safely in the home. Now, this is not to advocate for abuse or treachery, but it is a goal and it is outlined for us more than once in the Lord. But I digress. We will get into that later in the book. I will approach this very powerful subject in a later chapter. The list of heroes and gods that have answered the call spans time and geography. Looks like I've repeated that like 16 fucking times in the book, so I'm going to take that out. From prehistory unto today. But for our purposes, we shall deal with but a few. As I previously stated, at the beginning of the prose era, we have two men, both of whom are wise and skilled in magic. Now we have to ask ourselves why a skill in magic might be one of the most prominent attributes of both these men. Well, it stems from the concept of that because I say it, it is so. Now, this is probably the most perfect display of a man's ego as we might see. To have power without the earning of it. To seek glory without earning it. In today's world, the term most often associated with such thought patterns is narcissistic, at least in the textbooks of the educated. They could also be considered as having a type of Machiavellian attribute, that is, the manipulation of words for short-term gain, irregardless of others. Suffice it to say, like the majority of people struggling today, they both have a lot to learn. I think that's the thing we could pick up from all of that. Yet they do answer the call. Unbeknownst to them, the Aesir know this. So they watch as these men attempt to sneak into Asgard, into the heavens by the way of the snake, that crooked path, the easiest route, going in disguises. It literally says, Lear comes by the way of the snake. Or no, Gylfi. But see, most importantly, it's one that's not very troubling. Seems to be the easiest thing to do, only to be greeted by sights and sounds that they are not prepared for. The challenge of remaining on task and in focus becomes much more serious than they might have assumed. Lear is met with a great banquet hall, and into it a procession of great swords so bright that they shine of themselves. Picture that in your mind's eye. Now understand what the sword represents. A very powerful image of the very phallic symbol of masculinity shining of its own accord. This is a big hint as to what we could become if we were capable of joining such a crowd. Imagine if the very essence of who you are is thoroughly infused with wisdom, competence, and kindness. We already know you have courage, else you wouldn't be here. The type that inspires others to want to believe that they are capable of great things as well. Now consider how much the skill in magic pales in comparison to the world-changing power of being able to inspire others. We can begin to glean from this very scene just how much Lear has to learn, as do we. Now, King Gylfi's entry is somewhat different, perhaps even more so in line with the challenges we face today. He is allowed in, and as he enters, the door closes behind him. Oh, shit. It's much the same with us. Once we begin and get a taste, perhaps a scent or a vision of what it all could become, the door behind us is closed. There is no greater tragedy than to stand at the door, bemoaning the loss of what you left behind. Yet people are doing just that every single day. Gylfie's demonstration of courage to move forward must not be overlooked. He is beset by scenes of a man juggling 7 anlaces, a type of sword, at once. He is witness to a great room filled with people, some drinking, some playing games, and still others fighting with weapons. These people are celebrating the powerful excesses of life, and it will be easy to become a part of this crowd and call it good. For they do not they all reside in what could be perceived as heaven itself? Everyone in this room is living in a manner that a great number of people wish they could live. A truly hedonistic lifestyle with no responsibility, and all their needs are met. They're akin to children, or more aptly to individuals who would prefer that a government or God handle all the details of their life, so long as they might get to enjoy a life of pleasure. A hall with a golden ceiling and much joy about. What they do not understand is this is all it will ever be. And at a whim, it will be taken away, or they will be vilified for indulging in the excesses of a society made up of slaves. To turn the other cheek, to bend the knee, to be meek as other greater men pass through the crowd. A temptation, to be sure, to a man who has lost half his stuff for a night of merrymaking. All of a sudden, things begin to click. Or a college student who has never had to produce, or a weak man who cannot say no unless it is an emotional response, or a woman who has repeatedly thrown herself into the role of concubine, the drug addict, the alcoholic, the voracious and morally reprehensible attitudes towards sexual indulgence, all of which are fully invested in the idea of, as my father was wont to tell me, if it feels good, do it. If it feels real good, do it a lot. The call to adventure is a call to let go of all that you think you love. You see the challenges of each? They represent the difficulty each one of us has in life. And hopefully you will begin to identify yours as well as you begin your own call to adventure. Gylfie, having succeeded in walking past the familiar in his life, is met by 3 thrones upon which aspects of Odin sit. Quite a sight to be sure, and then to be welcomed, to be handed a drink, and encouraged to ask his questions. And this is why we at first reject the idea of the call to adventure. I can't. I don't want to let go of this. A much deeper fear is, what will I become if all these things I do and say that I feel make me important, that validate my existence, are all of a sudden not a part of my makeup anymore? It's very difficult to conceive of the profound wisdom, strength, courage, kindness, all of the things that are attributes of the prayer of the victory bringer, if the limit of our expectation is to be taken care of, so we might indulge in hedonistic pleasures. One can see these things happening in real time as people age, though. Gone is the endurance, the strength, the beauty of youth, the sex appeal. The limits of juvenile behavior become more pronounced, and they are left behind. Bitter and uncertain, a trail of wreckage amongst loved ones and within their own thoughts becomes our legacy. All of us who have decided to read a book like this know at some level of our being that such things are true, but there's always a but. Guess what else comes along with such a lifestyle of immaturity? Pain. That great motivator of spiritual growth. Now, I have a collection of notes here, but that's about as far as I got this afternoon. But the next journeys that I'll be discussing will be Odin's journey. Having lost a great war, the journey he goes on to sacrifice himself to himself. You have Hercules, the embodiment of the idea of pathos, the virtuous struggle and suffering for fame and immortality. And there are 2 or 3 others that I'm going to add in here. I won't drift too far from our chosen path, but there are ideas in Hinduism. There are ideas in Buddhism. The Shinto have their concepts. I see the same things with Gilgamesh. And there are Syrian, Hittite, and Sumerian ideas that all say the same thing. Go on the fucking journey. Go on the journey. As John sent me an email early this week with an absolutely wonderful description of the stars and the origins of some of these ideas that I have read 2 or 3 times. And John, I'm telling you right now, I will give you credit, but some of those things are going in this book because they are amazing. Matter of fact, let me pull them up and share some of this wisdom that I was privy to, because it was amazing. So this is what my friend that showed up on here shared with me. Okay, now I'm going to leave the personal details out, John, but there's some things here that are very important. We're talking about Tyr and Wolf depicted in the stars. He has a website here about the Wanderer, and it is phenomenal. I wonder if I can share this here. Probably not. Don't see how to do it. Yes. So if you look at this image, imagine how old it is. Look at the style of the ships, the very wonderful things. This is Tyr and the Wolf. These are amazing ideas that are contained in the stars that are a part of the world we live in, right? It's an amazing idea. Midday, midnight, the morning, the evening, the horizon, north, south. There's no limits to some of these understandings. So standing behind the dear warband, a wondrous high wall, worm stained, a host of ash spears hungry for carnage, men destroyed, a marvelous fate. Storms batter the stone cliff, snowstorm attacking, frost blankets the earth, winter moaning when the dark one comes, night shadows blacken, stars fall from the north, a hungry wolf, hailstorm, hater of men. So the storm, the stars falls from the north. This is a reference, and it's in the Voluspa, and it's in a couple others, and I wrote about it. I have a distinct feeling that refers to the Younger Dryas comet impact. It lines up perfectly with the description of the carnage that happens at Ragnarok. But once we also need to understand, when I'm talking about this journey, this call to adventure, much of the profound ideas that occur in life have correlations in this mythological ideas of death. So if the call to adventure is the death of everything you love, and the greatest example of that is wisdom's sacrifice of himself to himself, therein lies the real fear of most of this, is that the person that we know who we are now will die and become something greater. So there is some very important stuff here. The Northern Star. I'm still working through this, John, and it's fabulous. So when we start discussing the journey, oh, I'm sorry. Well, it was an image. It was a wonderful image, and I will probably seek permission to reproduce it. But there are some amazing things that are The things that I talk about here are typically, thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. I will give you full credit, though, in the book and send you a copy of it. the, the thing that I struggle with most people, is that whenever someone comes in to this pathway, after years of languishing under the lash of Christianity, don't go there, don't go near there, you'll go to hell. We immediately find freedom. We immediately find the freedom to act in ways that heretofore we've not been allowed to. That's a great challenge in and of itself, as it's outlined with King Gilfie. He has to, the door is closed. He's faced with this great hall. He has a vision of all of the things that would be, hey, we're going to have a good time from here on out. All things are great. We have hedonistic societies, aspects of our society today, that the greatest aspect of the value of their being is their ability to indulge in their sexual proclivities. That savage, passionate state of being that people call out, oh God, or Jesus, or whatever, I know that sounds funny, but that ecstatic state was a part and parcel of the experience of the individuals of our ancestors considered to be unique, special, and sacred, not tawdry and cheap as they are made to be today in many cases, nor are they or misunderstood in some aspects. The call to adventure, what does that benefit us? Well, number one, if we follow this path and go through all of these trials, as Hercules outlines most clearly, Hercules also dies and goes south for 3 days. He visits Hades for 3 days, right? Then he ascends to the heavens and is granted immortality, right? His suffering, the loss of everything that he loved, his wife and his children, and the 12 labors, each one of them representing an aspect of a man's ego, or a problem that in the thought process of mankind that makes us think we are greater than we really are. He also ascends, and as he does so, he speaks to the dawn. He speaks to the beautiful dawn as he moves up. Now, King Gilfie and Lear, I don't know if they're granted immortality, but I do know that as men, they represent the idea that we too have the ability to learn what they learned. What can I do with that? Is there a place for that in this society? And I think that's the real question that most of us need to understand. We don't want to be the fringe element of a fringe element. There is something within us that says, these actions, this course that I take, this idea that I hold dear, this faith that I celebrate is valuable to the world. And I want to emulate that. Okay, how do we do that? Well, I'm going to wear a beard, a mohawk. I'm going to get covered in tattoos, and I'm going to drink heavily and just be a big savage individual in today's world. In a world that celebrates weakness as a virtue, I will be a savage. And that will be a demonstration of the power of my faith. I can appreciate that in a number of ways, having been a soldier, right? I can appreciate that as a father. I can appreciate that as a man whose sons are still young and in the prime of their life and still very much in it to win it. But what I can appreciate is that it is demonstrated, or it is offered as the very limit of what we can become. What can a man like that offer society? Well, how about if we continue to do that and showed how to sacrifice ourselves to ourselves and demonstrate those wonderful things in the ballad of the prayer of the victory bringer, to be granted wisdom and goodly speech and healing hands lifelong. See, this is a very different approach to everything that so much of the heathen Austro community seems to want to appreciate. All of them, if you look across the board, I don't care if it's right or left, want to be somewhere other than where they are. We want to be something different. We want to celebrate that unique idea of I'm important. And yet far too many of us stop short of that goal before we begin to be that individual that inspires others to want to do what you know must be done, to take that path less traveled, to struggle through the briars of life, to lean into the difficulties as if they were a burden to shoulder and work through, not go around, not try to deal with it by the way of the snake, but to put our shoulders into it, to put our back into it, to put our hearts and minds into it and step up to the place. Yeah. So this, I agree with the same thing. So I've often said that Loki represents the uninspired human intellect, and I got that from a theosophist point of view, and I felt it to be very appropriate in a number of ways. It is the uninspired, the uninitiated sitting at the table, and though he has the chance to become a part of something, he fails to live up to the responsibility to do it. And in the end, what's it cost him? It also costs him everything he loves, but it also binds him. He is bound there. So while there's not necessarily a hell for us to go to, there is the idea that if we wish to approach and enjoy a seat at the table, we should come, maybe not necessarily with our hat in our hands, but showing up as if we know something is probably not going to be the best way to do it. It's very difficult for, I've spent a long time looking at this stuff, and I know there's people that have done it for a lot longer than I have. And many of them I call friends. Listening to them and talking to them and sorting through what they say and how they live and how they act and what they look like and the lives they live and the children that the people that their children become, in some cases, and I am loath to say it, it comes up somewhat short. And this saddens me. But I suppose such is the way of the nature of faith and spiritual development. So, having said all that this evening, I have been working on that and I'm continuing to work on this. There are a number of things that this call to adventure, this willingness to sacrifice, this ability to love, this promise of what we could become. It's in the lore. It's clear if you know what you're looking for. And they will be expanded and expounded upon in future shows as I write this book and share it with everyone as I write it. That's the goal. Now, if I fall short of that goal, I'm not going to fall short of that goal because it's tattooed on my arm. Here is a guiding star, ever on its course across the mists of night, and it never fails. So, having marked myself with that, and I have to live up to it. Didn't really think of that when I did it, but now I got it. So, tomorrow's Monday. I will be live here pretty quick on the Gothi program on the Patreon. It will be uploaded to Patreon as well as this video, and we will move forward. Tomorrow is Monday. Start our week all over. And if you happen to have to go out there and work and deal with the masses, I encourage you to grab it by the nose and whip its ass. Does anyone have anything they want to discuss, talk about, or share? I've got a couple of minutes here. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay. You too, Jeremy. Appreciate you being here. I appreciate all of you being here. And I hope that you, I really hope you get to enjoy all the blessings you are worth this week. I think that probably is the better thing. I'm tired of fighting it. I'd rather celebrate the blessings of the blessings that I get to enjoy from my faith. And I got to go move my car before I go get a ticket. All right, guys. I appreciate everyone. go out there and be worth the blessings you have. I think that's how we'll do it from now on. Be worth the blessings you have. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate all of you. And I will see you again next week, unless YouTube finds another video in which I've shown my ass and I get banned from YouTube. So thank you very much. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next week.